Okay, we are going to start Chapter 7 this week. Everything you've been doing up to this point has been a review. We try our best to make sure before we start to Chapter 7 that we review some of the stuff from Chapter 5 and 6 because some students don't get there depending on the teacher that you had. And plus, those are two important topics that we just went over in terms of slope and substitution, elimination, all that stuff. But this unit here revolves around exponents and their uses in algebra. In order to understand the overall applications of exponents, we must first learn how exponents act when we're simplifying them. Zero exponents is the first thing that we're going to talk about in this chapter. Hopefully you have a calculator around you so you can work with a short quiz. If not, be sure to get one out so you can learn the first portion of this lesson easily. Keep in mind that we use the caret key to type in power. So that's the button here that points to the air. It's called a caret key. So evaluating 3 to the 5th would be done by hitting 3 caret 5 equals, and you should get the answer of 243. So again, I would type in 3 and then caret and then 5 and then equals, and that would give me a 243. Some of you have the TI calculators where I think you hit y to the power of x, but whatever it is, just make sure you communicate with whoever your teacher is so you can try to figure out how that works. So what I want you to do is take about 30 seconds to answer a list of problems that follow on the next page. Remember to take your time and use your common sense. You do not need paper. I just need you to work through them on your calculator and see if you can figure out the answers. You have 30 seconds to answer these 8 problems. Go. Stop. I know it wasn't 30 seconds. But here's what you need to understand. If I type 6 caret 0, the answer is 1. Sorry about that. If I type in 4 caret 0, the answer is 1. 9 caret 0, the answer is 1. 2 caret 0, the answer is 1. Hopefully you're getting the pattern on why I said stop so soon. Typing in anything to the 0 power, as long as all that is going to the 0 power is 1, all that to the 0 power is 1, any letter to the 0 power is going to be 1. So again, hopefully you noticed, and even though I didn't let you type it in, after the first couple problems, the answer kept popping up. So again, I did this because the best way to learn that anything to the power of 0 equals 1 is just by kind of typing in a few of them. Hopefully you did that. And if you don't remember, just type something to the 0 power and you will get 1 as your answer. I could type 9685741 caret 0 and you get the answer of 1. So again, the 0 power property is very important. So when it comes to variables, just think about the verbal explanation of each power. A to the 3rd means I have 3 A's, right? B to the 5th means I have 5 B's. C to the 10th means I have 10 C's. So therefore, D to the 0 means I have 0 D's. So think about that. If you're ever going to simplify a problem that ends off looking like this, or some of them they'll give you that, if you have 5 A to the 2nd, B to the 0, C to the 3rd, D to the 0, what that means is you have a 5, 2 A's, 0 B's, 3 C's, and 0 D's. Well, the special part is, why would we write those two if they aren't there? So you can simplify it even more by eliminating the variables that have none left. In this case, again, the B and the D have a power of 0, so it simplifies actually to just cross those two things out and rewrite without those two letters as 5A squared C to the 3rd. So rule number 1 that you need to remember, and you might want to write it down for yourself, is do not leave any answer with an exponent of 0 because it's probably going to be marked wrong. That is your 0 property explanation. So again, it's kind of easy to do. Anything to the 0 power is 1, and if you have a variable going to the 0 power, just eliminate it and take it away out of the problem. The second part of our lesson deals with negative exponents, so consider the following situation. I usually try to use stories to help you remember things. So I want you to imagine that a number has 2 neighborhoods. There is a numerator neighborhood, which is at the top, and the denominator neighborhood, which is at the bottom. People who are happy with where they live have a positive conscience. That means like they're happy about what's going on. People who want to move to the other neighborhood have a negative conscience. As you know, there are people who live in certain places that like it. There are people who live in certain places that don't like it. There are happy and unhappy people everywhere. So now just imagine that the conscience can be found by looking at the number floating above that person. So we can identify every particular person's conscience in terms of whether they're happy or sad by looking at the floating number. So look at the following situation and determine who is happy and unhappy, and then we're going to move the unhappy people to the proper neighborhood, as I will say. Again, there's only a top and bottom place to live. And so if you look at this, you have a to the third, b to the negative second, c to the seventh, d to the negative eighth, e to the negative third, f to the fourth, g to the ninth. I think common sense should be able to tell you who the unhappy people are. For example, a to the third is a positive number, so I'm going to leave it there because I think a is happy where it's at. The thing is, b is a negative second. It is unhappy there because of this negative 2, and so what I'm going to do is put b to the second down here, because once I move b to the other neighborhood, it's now happy. Remember, it's unhappy living here. That means it wants to be here. c to the seventh is happy where it's at. d to the negative eighth, because that is an unhappy number, means d wants to be down here. And notice the number stays the same. It's just that the sign changes. So again, d to the negative eighth was unhappy here, so I moved it down here. E to the negative third, that is a negative 3, which means e is unhappy. Notice e is on the bottom, which means that e just wants to move up here. The number stays the same, it just becomes positive. F to the fourth, happy where it's at, leave it down here. G to the negative ninth, not happy here, so G wants to move up here. And now you notice every number up here is happy, every number down here is happy, everyone is where they want to be. So what we just did is simplified our expression by moving the unhappy variables, as we call them, to the proper location. The process isn't as tough as it seems. It's just going to be a matter of, finding some way to make sense of it and making sure you don't allow your question to make you stop too early, as we see on rule number 2, which is do not leave any answer with a negative exponent from here on out ever, because your teacher will have the right to mark you wrong if you do that. So again, you can't have any zero exponents. You also cannot have any negative exponents. And these represent the only 2 rules for the lesson. Now that we know how to remove variables from a power of 0, and we know to move negative exponents to the other neighborhood, as I called it, let's just see what we can do to apply some of these examples for ourselves before we move on. Simplify means write it as simply as possible. That's why they say simplify. Notice S-I-M-P, S-I-M-P, simple. I guess there's an L in there too, but either way, simplify means write it as simply as possible. If you have x to the negative third, this breaks the rule because I cannot have a negative 3 in my answer. If you think about this as a fraction, it would be x to the negative third over 1, which means that x doesn't want to be here, it wants to move down here. That is how you write a number with a negative exponent. You simply move it down to the bottom. So again, x to the negative third simplifies to be 1 over x to the third. If you see a question that has like this one, d to the third, e to the negative second, notice the d is happy, the e is not, and so therefore you keep the d where it's at, move the e down to the bottom as a positive 2. And again, whenever you have a negative exponent on just a regular number, that number always wants to move down to the bottom. That is how you would go ahead and simplify that part. 3 to the negative fourth. First off, we understand that 3 is not happy, so the first thing we do is we put 1 over 3 to the positive fourth. But because I can do 3 to the fourth, I actually want to do that 3 caret 4, which is 81, which turns us into 1 over 81. That is how I would simplify 3 to the negative fourth. Here's another thing. If you type it in, 3 caret negative 4, you notice that you get your actual part there, which if you turn to a fraction, math, enter, notice that your answer is still 1 over 81. So there are a couple different ways to get there. Just make sure again you are used to it and that you practice this skill today and this week so that you get it down. Here, m to the negative third, n to the 0, p to the fourth. First off, m is not happy, so I know that m to the third is going to go on the bottom. Remember, n to the 0 means that there are no n's, which means I can just cross that out because it's not even there. P to the fourth is happy where it was, so I simply write it there. This would be the simplified version of what we just looked at. All we're really doing is moving numbers around, putting numbers where they want to be, putting variables where they want to be, and writing it in a simpler form. This is nothing really with any kind of algebra yet, because all we're doing is rewriting numbers. These two look alike, but I want you to pay attention to what happens in terms of how I work them out. This negative is in the parentheses here, so whenever I have this, the first thing I'm going to do is put 1 over parentheses negative 4 to the sixth. I also want you to pay attention to what happens when I type in parentheses negative 4 caret 6, that I get the answer of 4,096. So it's 1 over 4,096. That is my simplified answer. Over here, though, the negative is not in parentheses, so what happens is I end up with a negative 1 over 4 to the 6th, because this negative 6 is just attached to the 4. It is not attached to the negative. That is what you have to pay attention to. This was attached to the negative because of the parentheses. This is not attached to the negative, so the negative just stays there. Now pay attention to the fact that when I do 4 to the 6th, I get the same answer, but my answer is not positive anymore. It is a negative 1 over 4,096. So again, that's one question you're going to have to look out for over the course of this week, and on the worksheets you get to make sure that you pay attention to what goes on. Again, this one here, the negative went with it. I typed it in. I got a positive answer. If the negative is not in parentheses, it does not move down with the 4. The 4 is the only number that moves. Alright? Looking at this one, 1 over m to the negative 7th. Notice this is an unhappy number on the bottom, which means it just wants to be on the top. That is how you write a top m to the 7th with nothing under it. And then the last one, the key thing to remember is that a negative sign up front is fine. We've seen plenty of those. That is not a constant number. That is just a negative number. But this negative 2 is attached to x, which means that negative 3 is fine where it was. X squared wanted to move down because of that number there. Alright? So again, today is just a big day for you to go ahead and practice using those two rules. Tomorrow what we're going to do is take another step forward as we look at how to multiply two powers with the same base. It's very important that you have most of this lesson understood, or at least on the way to being understood, in order to be as effective as possible when the next lesson comes around. Use the rest of this hour, which you have a lot of time, to practice your craft. Answer the questions and make your mistakes. Remember, again, we learn more from our mistakes. If you experience lots of errors today, then you'll probably know how not to make them tomorrow, and you'll be better, which is what we're looking for. So good luck. Again, make sure you're working together, make sure you're asking questions and checking your answers, so you're not just kind of writing some stuff down on a piece of paper and hoping they're right.